Decisions made in boardrooms aren't always well received by gamers. Remember when Nintendo launched the 3DS? There were no major Nintendo games available. Or when Capcom put the DLC for one of their fighting games on disc? Game companies sure have made some mistakes over the years, but often things turn out okay in the end. However, here are 10 mistakes they probably regret by now. In the late 80s, Nintendo and Sony were working together to make a disc-based expansion for the Super Nintendo and a standalone disc-based console. Licensing issues between the two companies made Nintendo move away from the project. Instead, they went with Sony's competitor, Philips. In the end, the SNES CD never hit the market, and Philips created some abysmal Zelda games.
As it is written, you, Link, are the hero of Corridai.
I guess that's worth a kiss, huh? Ha!
At the same time, Sony decided to work on their own gaming system, which became the now dominant PlayStation brand. Nintendo created its own competition. They must really regret what happened almost 30 years ago.
You're the best player ever.
This is it, Xbox One.
Microsoft had the lead during the previous console generation. Gamers favored the Xbox 360 because of its friendly interface, awesome game lineup, and excellent online service. But Microsoft threw all that goodwill away when they announced the Xbox One back in 2013.
Xbox, watch TV. And with that simple command, I'm watching live TV.
The company wanted the console to always be online. It was supposed to block used games, there was no backwards compatibility, and Kinect would function even when the system was turned off. Gamers hated it, and Microsoft got some serious punches while Sony and the PS4 took the lead. We guess they underestimated the impact their policy would have. Thankfully, they changed a lot since, but they still feel the aftermath of that one bad decision.
It sounds simple and obvious, and it should be, but today it isn't.
When you start with the Genesis, you can always add a Sega CD. And new Genesis 32X. Everything else is cold and stiff.
Once upon a time, Sega was one of the leading companies when it came to gaming hardware. The Sega Genesis had a huge audience despite the popularity of the NES and Super Nintendo. Sega had a decent market share, but replacing your moneymaker with a newer console is difficult. So Sega decided to build add-ons. The Sega 32X increased the power of the console, while the Sega CD added disc-based games to its library. Poor timing, high pricing, and a lack of games made sure there was hardly an audience for these add-ons. This was Sega's first major slip that took them on a downward spiral.
Pretend it's a game.
Sega Saturn is the newest and most indulgent taste temptation from Sega.
The Sega Saturn did pretty well in Japan, but it failed miserably in the States and in Europe. The console was released in the West without a proper announcement or marketing campaign. Retailers weren't prepared, and there were hardly any games for the $399 Saturn.
Sega Saturn. Play your games in the 21st century.
Sega's already damaged reputation got another blow when Sony jumped into the market with the first PlayStation console. Funny enough, Sega thought the Atari Jaguar would be a bigger rival. But with the $299 price tag and a vision to move forward, it was Sony who took over.
Playthings Maker has no such history. Sega Saturn gives you arcade graphics and gameplay that could only come from the power of 3 processors.
Nintendo was on fire in the 80s and 90s. The NES, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy were all awesome gaming systems. To bridge the gap between the Super Nintendo and the Nintendo 64, the company tried its hand at VR. But the results were absolutely disastrous.
Virtual Boy. See it now in 3D.
The Virtual Boy was unfinished and pushed to market to make way for the Nintendo 64. It was a clunky tabletop device that caused headaches to consumers and only offered these weird red monochrome video games. In the end, it sold only 770,000 units, and it was only in stores for a couple months.
It's Wario Land, a 3D game for a 3D world.
Wait till they get a load of me!
Even though the Xbox 360 is now known as one of the biggest consoles ever, it did come at a price. The console had some design flaws, causing the hardware to overheat. This resulted in the infamous Red Ring of Death. A few months after launching the Xbox 360, the phenomenon popped up. Microsoft extended the console's warranty from 1 to 3 years and replaced every failing console with a new one. It's estimated that these replacements cost Microsoft a whopping $1 billion. If only the hardware malfunctions would have been discovered before launching the system, it would have saved the company a lot of money.
The new Xbox 360, here today, ready for tomorrow.
The PC market has been dominated by Steam for years now. At one point, publishers decided they were sick of sharing royalties with Valve, and many game companies developed their own services. Electronic Arts made Origin, a system that's basically only used nowadays to run games from EA. Upon launch, the license agreement of EA Origin had some interesting text. It stated that your account, with all the games attached to it, would be deleted if you wouldn't log in for 2 years. This got a lot of people very angry. EA said an overactive lawyer added the text without their knowledge, but we find that very hard to believe.
Augment Your Pre-Order is your chance to customize your Deus Ex experience from the very beginning.
Deus Ex: Human Revolution was a huge success for Square Enix. It was a comeback of epic proportions, and the game sold millions of copies across multiple consoles. Of course, its sequel, Mankind Divided, was met with open arms by gamers worldwide. But then, Square Enix did the weirdest thing ever. It announced a pre-order program with unlockable tiers based on the amount of pre-orders.
As pre-order numbers climb, more rewards are unlocked. If pre-order goals are reached, everyone gets to select one reward from each tier, as well as the ultimate prize.
The publisher was treating this AAA game as an independent, crowdfunded project. Sure, it was supposed to mimic the skill tree in the game, but gamifying a pre-order bonus is ridiculous. Gamers got angry, and Square Enix moved away from the pre-order program altogether.
I never asked for this.
Even though Fallout 3 and 4 were a huge commercial success, the role-playing series didn't start off as a game played from a first-person perspective. Fallout 1 and 2 had a top-down perspective and featured turn-based combat. Interplay was sitting on gold, but eventually they decided to invest in console games. The long-rumored Van Buren project, which would be Fallout 3, got cancelled. Disappointing results led to financial troubles, and eventually Interplay sold the single-player rights for Fallout to Bethesda.
And gentle people who live in my hometown.
They published Fallout 3 and sold an estimate amount of 12.5 million copies of the game, while Interplay still struggles today.
I feel so well.
And I want to apologize both personally and on behalf of the company for any anxiety that we've caused you.
誠に申し訳ございませんでした。
The PlayStation Network got punished in the worst way possible in 2011. The network was hacked and details from 77 million users were leaked. It was the biggest security breach in gaming history. It made Sony shut down the whole network for 3 weeks.
And that is something we absolutely do not take lightly.
Home addresses, names, credit card data, everything leaked, and it took Sony a week to notify its consumer base. Sony lost a lot of money and goodwill during that time. Things like two-step verification need to be in place from the start, and Sony learned that lesson the hard way.
This isn't the first time that I've come to the stage at an E3 press conference with an elephant in the room.
There you have it. 10 decisions game companies probably regret by now. In some cases, things turned out all right in the end. Let's hope future generations of game developers and businessmen learn from these mistakes. What do you think is the worst decision ever made by a gaming company? Let us know in the comments or on social media.
With only one processor, it doesn't have the power to do it. Fly, plaything, fly. You're not ready.